and a very warm welcome. I am Dr. Pankaj Anand. Let me first thank the Indian Society of Critical Care Medicine and especially Dr. Tapas Sahu for having given me this opportunity to speak in front of you. Over the last 1 to 1.5 years, we've all faced this menace of severe COVID. We have handled these patients almost daily in our ICUs. And we've realized that it is not just the respiratory involvement that needs to be addressed. Other organs are also severely involved and are a major cause of morbidity and mortality in these patients. And of course, kidney is a major victim of this disease. So over the next 15-20 minutes, I'm going to talk about the dysfunction of kidneys in severe COVID and how it needs to be addressed. Now, just to make this more illustrative, let me start with a small case history. This was a 77-year-old gentleman, a known case of diabetes, hypertension, coronary artery disease, with no significant past history of renal dysfunction. Comes to the ER with history of high-grade fever for the previous 4 days, with dry cough and shortness of breath. So obviously he is kept in the isolation or what we call the transit ICU. He's tachycardic, tachypneic, is slightly drowsy, even though he's producing good urine. His ABG shows mixed acidosis with severe hypoxia. So he is instituted on 100% oxygen, IV fluids, a central venous catheter is inserted in his right jugular vein, and he is started on basic antibiotics, here piperacillin tazobactam. Now his investigations show a total leukocyte count of 6,500. There is severe lymphopenia with a lymphocyte count of 16. His liver enzymes are raised. His urea at the time of admission is 32 with a creatinine of 1.4. However, he shows the presence of protein as well as blood in his urine. His ejection fraction is 48% and his RT-PCR nasopharyngeal swab comes positive for COVID-19. So he is therefore shifted to the COVID ICU accordingly. Day 3, his oxygenation worsens. We have to intubate him and ventilate him. His PiO2 by FiO2 ratio is less than 200, so this is severe ARDS. He needs inotropes even though after a fluid challenge, and his urine output now starts going down. His HRCT is as expected with any severe COVID infection, and the severity score is actually 19. He is being ventilated as per the ARDS net protocol and is prone. His urea now jumps to 82 and the creatinine is 3.4. Most of his inflammatory markers are very high. He is therefore instituted on dexamethasone, low molecular weight heparin and other supportive treatment. Obviously, remdesivir cannot be given because of the renal involvement. And considering his very high interleukin 6 levels, we also have to give him a single shot of tocilizumab. Unfortunately, all this does not help. Day 4, he does not produce any urine, still needs noradrenaline. His urea has jumped to 126 with a creatinine of 6. We therefore have to institute renal replacement therapy in the form of slow, low efficiency dialysis. Now friends, COVID-19, you all will agree, has evolved and expanded rapidly throughout the world. Its full spectrum of effects ranges from mild self-limiting respiratory tract involvement to severe ARDS, multi-organ failure and death. The disease is predominantly a respiratory disorder, but as you all know, much of the morbidity and mortality is associated and attributed to involvement of other organs, injury to them, along with the heart, kidneys and other organs. Now, talking specifically of kidneys, kidney involvement is pretty common. More than 40% of cases who get admitted to hospitals show abnormal proteinuria. Now, AKI is common among critically ill patients with COVID-19, affecting approximately 20 to 40% of patients as per the studies available from Europe and USA. And it is considered a marker not just of the disease severity, it also is a very negative prognostic factor for the survival of the patient. Now, the overall burden of AKI in COVID-19 seems to be underestimated because we usually do not have the previous serum creatinine values available with us. Around 20% of patients who come to the ICU with severe COVID-19 require RRT usually at a median of 15 days from the onset of illness. And if you consider, there are different studies giving different rates, but AKI is definitely now emerging as a common and important sequelae of severe COVID-19 with rates as high as 33 to 43% among hospitalized patients. Therefore, it becomes very imperative that we recognize kidney involvement early in COVID-19 and use the preventive and therapeutic measures to limit subsequent either development of AKI or its progression to more severe stages, both not just to reduce the morbidity but also to reduce the mortality in these patients. Now let us talk about the pathophysiology of AKI and COVID-19, and I am going to take some time and effort on this. As you will appreciate, the kidney involvement in COVID-19 is definitely multifactorial, with cardiovascular comorbidities and predisposing factors being important contributors. The cardiorenal syndrome, especially the failure of the right ventricle secondary to the COVID-19 pneumonia, might lead to congestion of the kidneys and development of subsequent AKI. Left ventricular dysfunction might also lead to low cardiac output, arterial underfilling, ultimately leading to hypoperfusion of the kidneys and their failure. Now, we have autopsy level evidence to suggest that the endothelium is affected both in lungs and kidneys, which is probably the cause for the proteinuria that we see in a lot of these patients. Virus particles have been found in the renal endothelial cells, which indicates that viremia is probably a cause of the endothelial damage. COVID can directly infect the renal tubular epithelium, mainly through the ACE2 dependent pathways, and thereby might cause mitochondrial dysfunction, acute tubular necrosis, formation of protein reabsorption vacuoles, collapsing glomerulopathy, and leakage from the Bowman's capsule of proteins. Another probable mechanism could be a COVID-related immune response dysregulation observed mainly through lymphopenia and the cytokine release syndrome or the cytokine storm. There is also evidence of the involvement of rhabdomyolysis, macrophage activation syndrome, hypercoagulability, and endotheliitis. Now, mechanisms that have been proposed include an ischemic acute tubular necrosis, cytokine storm, and direct viral invasion of the proximal tubular cells and renal dysfunction. Now, this interaction between angiotensin II overactivity, innate and adaptive immune and complement pathways, and the coagulation system could influence both the severity and the outcome of acute renal dysfunction. Now, this interaction between angiotensin II overactivity, innate and adaptive immune and complement pathways, and the coagulation system could influence both the severity and the outcome of acute kidney injury. So, if you look at this particular diagram, once the virus gets attached to the ACE2 receptor, there is activation of angiotensin II leading to complement activation, leading to hypercoagulability and microangiopathy. There is lymphopenia leading to myeloid cell activation, leading to cytokine storm. There is, as I discussed earlier, a direct viral invasion leading to tubular epithelium and podocyte damage, and there could be rhabdomyolysis. All of this, along with the hypoxia and hypotension caused because of heart and lung involvement, could cause acute tubular necrosis, interstitial inflammation, podocytopathy, microangiopathy, and collapsing glomerulitis, ultimately leading to acute kidney injury. So the SARS-CoV-2 infection leading to hypovolemia, endothelial damage, cytokine storm, pneumonia and its therapies, and hypercoagulability ultimately leads to the endothelial dysfunction, excessive and many times wrong use of mechanical ventilation strategies, hypervolemia, myocardial dysfunction. All of this ultimately causes injury to the. Now, if you look at the timeline of the injury to kidneys, in the initial stage, which is also the asymptomatic or also called the viral phase, there is usually direct viral effect on the kidneys leading to collapsing coagulopathy, endothelial damage, coagulopathy, etc. However, in the late stages, the symptomatic or respiratory or the multi-organ involvement, which is usually happens because of the host response, there is generally indirect effects. So inappropriate fluid management or the use of mechanical ventilation or the nephrotoxins could hit the kidneys. There is many a times an organ crosstalk, and these patients with fever or sepsis or diarrhea, there might be hypovolemia leading to acute tubular injury. So targeting of ACE2 by the COVID results in angiotensin dysregulation, innate and adaptive immune pathway activation, and hypercoagulation. There is also significant organ crosstalk between the injured lungs, the heart and the kidneys, which might further create injury. So in short, AKI is actually, if you look at the pathophysiology, there is a complex process driven by the virus mediated injury along with the cytokine storm, the angiotensin 2 pathway activation, dysregulation of the complement, hypercoagulation and microangiopathy, all of which interact with the common and known risk factors for AKI leading to the development of injury. Now, erythrocyte aggregation and heme mediated pathways pathology might actually worsen oxidative stress, inflammation and complement activation to aggravate the microvascular injury. So what should we do to prevent and manage this AKI? And my further talk is based on this the consensus statement of the COVID-19 associated acute kidney injury report of the 25th Acute Disease Quality Initiative Work Group, or the ADQI work group. We have to understand that the management of AKI in COVID-19 cannot be very different from the management of AKI in other diseases. So there is no specific evidence which could suggest that COVID-19 AKI should be managed any differently from other causes of AKI in the critically ill patients. The recommendation says that a strategy based on KDIGO and other relevant guidelines are appropriate for risk and stage-based prevention and management of COVID-19 AKI. Both hemodynamic as well as fluid management needs to be individualized. They recommend the use of balanced crystalloids as against for initial management for the expansion of the intravascular volume, and obviously they recommend limiting nephrotoxic drug exposure. Now, if you look at this particular slide, you'll realize that most of the strategies used in COVID-19 related AKI managing are the same as with other forms of AKIs. So, if you were to classify, divide it into high risk AKI stage 1, 2 and 3, the common management strategies include standard of care to prevent and manage multi-organ failure. We need to individualize fluid management. We need to avoid saline unless specifically indicated. We need to consider dynamic hemodynamic monitoring. We need obviously have to measure the serum creatinine and urine output regularly. We need to correct the hypoglycemia. Consider alternatives to radio contrast if possible. Avoid nephrotoxic agents and consider AKI risk in selecting our ventilatory strategies. common to all stages of AKI. However, once the AKI has set up, then you need to do a proper diagnostic workup, and when it reaches the stage 2 or 3, then this is the time when we need to modify our the drugs as per the pharmacokinetics, to change the drugs or change their dosages, and we should start considering renal replacement therapies. So again repeating that patients with COVID-19 AKI should be treated using the standard of care that we use in all patients with AKI. Ventilator strategy in patients with COVID-19 should be selected to reduce the risk of AKI. Kidney disease improving the global outcome practice guidelines, which are applicable here also. So care strategies for patients with COVID-19 in ICU remain largely supportive. The kidney disease improving global outcome supportive care guidelines, which include avoidance of nephrotoxins, regular monitoring of serum creatinine, and urine output, consideration of hemodynamic monitoring in critically ill patients are useful here as well. We need to mitigate the volutrauma and barotrauma through the application of lung protective ventilation. We need to adjust fluid balance according to volume responsiveness. We should avoid volume overload. At the same time, volume depletion should also be corrected. High PEEP and recruitment maneuvers could further compromise cardiac output, and we need to be very cautious about this. Altered pharmacokinetics and renal effects of COVID-19 specific therapies are considered when prescribing and adjusting. Several drugs which are used in patients with COVID-19 might require dose adjustments or are contraindicated in patients with impaired kidney function, the most common being remdesivir. Protein intake should be gradually increased per day in these patients. Early enteral feeding is preferred over parenteral nutrition, and prone position is never a contraindication for enteral feeding. Now, let me now move over to the renal replacement therapies. I will not go into great details, but we need to consider the indications. Remember, when we talk about RRT indications in patients with COVID-19 AKI, the principles, as I said, remain the same as with other patients with other causes of AKI. We need to consider that acute RRT when metabolic and fluid demands exceed total kidney capacity. So just chasing the urea or creatinine does not help. We need to watch the metabolic and fluid demands. Selection of modalities should be based, obviously, it should be individualized. It should be based on the need of the patient, the local expertise, and how good and efficient our staff and equipment is. Prolonged modes of RRT like CRRT, PIRRT, SLED, or peritoneal dialysis should be considered if your patient is hemodynamically unstable, as many of our patients with severe COVID are, or those with fluid overload, or in whom shift in fluid balance are poorly tolerated. Continuous veno-venous hemodialysis or continuous veno-venous hemodiafiltration modalities and minimizing post-filter replacement fluid in patients who are on CRT will decrease the filtration fraction, which is very important in these patients. Dose, I think not important here. Just a word about vascular access. The ideal site is the right internal jugular. Why? Because patients who are sick enough to have this amount of renal dysfunction usually have a very serious or severe respiratory dysfunction as well, and majority of them are probably being prone. So if you put in a subclavian line, it might not be possible to prone your patients. So the ideal site is the right IJV. Now, talking of different modalities, we all know CRRT is the therapy of choice if our patient is hemodynamically unstable because it causes fewer hypotensive episodes. There is possibly earlier renal recovery, more effective management of marked fluid overload, preferred in catabolic patients or patients with high protein requirements. But the problem is advanced technology is required, specially trained healthcare personnel are needed. It is obviously not available in majority of our hospitals, at least in young cities. IHD is widely available, allows treatment of several patients with the same machine in a given day. Higher blood flow may reduce risk of clotting, but it is less effective in reaching daily fluid balance goal. It can actually cause or increase hemodynamic instability. So if the patient is on inotropes, probably this is not the best choice. Peritoneal dialysis is widely available, no circuit clotting concerns, no venous access required, less likely to exacerbate hemodynamic instability, but more challenging in patients in prone position for obvious reasons. Risk of pericatheter leaks are more common, and protocols and policies for acute PD are not always available at all sites. Now, what about the timing of RRT? The RRT initiation, vascular exercise and modality of acute RRT obviously has to be based on patient's needs, our local expertise and the availability of staff and equipment. If using CRRT, it is suggested that we use CVV-HD or CVV-HF to decrease the filtration fraction and therefore reduce the risk of the clotting circuit. Now, what about surge planning? By surge planning, we mean that you get a lot of patients suddenly requiring hemodialysis, as occurs in a wave of the pandemic. So here we need a coordinated response to an increase in the demand for RRT. We need to consider adjustments to RRT modalities and indications, anticoagulation and dose as part of local response to the wave. We need to create a surge plan, the health system, to maintain and periodically update the RRT surge plan. Use of wider variety of acute RRT modalities may be needed. We need to maintain an ongoing inventory of available RRT devices, disposable RRT equipments and RRT fluids, and obviously we need to do a proper workforce planning. What about extracorporeal blood purification techniques? They have been found to be useful. Hemoperfusion can remove your inflammatory molecules. Therapeutic plasma exchange can remove inflammatory mediators and proteins associated with hypercoagulability. CRRT can remove target molecules by adsorption, diffusion or convection. I'll skip this. Just to conclude, kidney involvement, we all know, is more common than what was initially thought. Remember, the first studies that was available from Wuhan said that there was hardly any kidney involvement. We now know that it is much more common and is associated with significantly higher morbidity and mortality. The pathophysiology of COVID-19 AKI is multifactorial. Rates of COVID-19 AKI vary considerably between studies, but the incidence of over 20% in hospital patients. Many of the treatment recommendations as well as preventive measures remain the same between COVID-19 AKI and AKI arising from non-viral causes encountered in the ICU. More aggressive anticoagulation regimens may be needed, and given their involvement of systemic inflammation to multi-organ failure in COVID-19, the use of extracorporeal therapy should also be concerned. Dear friends, handling severe COVID is a challenge for all of us. Remember, we are not just treating the lungs in these patients. Kidneys could actually, their dysfunction could significantly change the prognosis of the patient. So always consider keep an eye on the kidneys while you are managing any patients of severe COVID. Thank you.